Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Phillips. Um, the other day, I did a presentation at a wonderful conference in Minneapolis, St. Paul that takes place at the Best Buy World Headquarters. The conference is called Minnebar. In this particular case, it was Minnebar 19. And I took the opportunity to give a presentation on identity and personhood credentials in the 21st century. I wanted to make a little video to basically go over the same sort of thing so that everyone else can see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start by saying, well, I'll share my screen and then we'll go from there. Uh, all right. Uh, Again, my name is Rob Phillips, and I have been in the tech industry almost from the very beginning as a software engineer, as a systems architect. I've written a lot of code. I've deployed a lot of code. I'm particularly interested and have been interested in identification, ID, and personhood credentials. Now, there's been some opportunity to think about how we can control or at least put some guardrails up to AI, put some have some controls over blockchain because separately these things are can be quite problematic to our security, to our personhood. So I'm quite interested in how things work together, how the entire system from start to finish sort of works together, how they interact with each other. And so a while ago, I started building an application, um, and it's called Grokism. So if you go to my website at grokism.com, you'll see a little bit of what I'm talking about. Um, uh, Visit my LinkedIn page. You can scan the little QR code there. And, like I say, this has been a labor of intense sort of love for me because I believe that it is really an important sort of thing that we have to address. So identity and personhood credentials in the 21st century. Um, so when we talk about, you know, threats, fraud, we're talking about lots and lots and lots of money. And AI sort of gives us this ability to scale up and amplify the threat because it has access to compute resources and access to analytical resources that we have never had before, right? And I mean, in and of itself, if we do not, for example, provide some sort of way for it to be, to be controlled, to have some guardrails up, it's going to continue the amplification because it's just going to grow and grow and grow as far as its compute resources and everything like that, right? So the first thing we have to realize is that AI exists within existing systems. So it exists within our financial systems, it exists within our intellectual property systems, our government systems, our surveillance systems, our medical systems, and many more. I mean, all those things that we have to partake in to partake in modern life. I mean, especially the financial systems, and if you're a creator, intellectual property systems, and no one knows ultimately how, for example, AI trains itself, right? So we don't really know, right? So we have to think about AI. We have to think about how the systems work together and who or what is, controlling the data. Who or what is controlling, who has access to what, right? So there's a lot of technology risks in modern systems. We're talking about with AI risks, we have deep fakes, fraud, intellectual property theft, because we have no idea how these things, how AI is trained in particular, right? So the other thing we have to worry about are Web 2 identity issues. And what I mean by that is if you, for example, log into a Google app or log into Google or use your Google login, what it does is it does give you an opportunity to log into the application, and the application builders, the people that make the app, simply have to, use the API that Google provides to actually do something with it, right? The problem is that you do not own the data. You do not own anything about it. You cannot control what it goes into. You cannot control you know, who uses it, because Google owns it, right? So the other problem is lack of decentralization. Again, Google owns it, and Google is just one example. There's a whole bunch of other, a whole bunch of other situations. For example, I mean, just if you log into X, or if you log into Facebook, if you log into a Microsoft account, if you log in, even if you log into Apple, it's pretty much the same. They use the same sort of things. Now, one of the differences with Apple is that it makes a choice not to sell your data at that particular level, but it does have other ways to do almost the same thing, right? These are what I call legacy Web 2 identity issues. And one of the things about my app is that my intention is to build a system that is contrary and is designed to solve the problems that Web 2 identity, that Web 2 um, actually, causes, right? So, and then, so we think about the other sort of aspect of this. So, particularly, the contention I'm going to make is that AI is going to be the front end or the UI, the user interface, and blockchain is going to be the back end, right? And so part of the problem with blockchain is that it's an open protocol, at least in a public blockchain. So um, a blockchain is really just databases that are scaled out, right? So no one knows, there are people all over the world who run the nodes and who get paid for the nodes, who get paid to run the nodes through crypto. I mean, ultimately, to me, that's kind of what the definition of a public blockchain is. But I mean, we're all familiar with some of the Ponzi schemes and the theft and the misuse. I mean, we're familiar with even someone making a meme coin and then taking ownership of most of a good percentage of the meme coin. If you're a popular person and you put the meme coin on the market and you're a popular person, everybody else will buy it, and the value of your percentage of those meme coins will increase you know a lot. I mean, it certainly happened in many cases. I can think of two or three right out the top of my head where I would say that they're unethical, right? So when you think of these things as separately, they can be they can be harmful or they can be quite advantageous, right? So Web 2 gives us this ability to have, or I should say Google Web 2 has this ability to make our identity somewhat portable so that we can take it with us. It's always there no matter, and if the application uses it, and by now there's thousands and thousands of applications that actually use that service. And so your identity is portable between those particular services. That's a great thing. But again, you don't own the data. Blockchains are open protocols, and of course, AI risks, you have no idea. And so, taken separately, these things can be harmful or they can be advantageous depending on how you look at it. But now people are starting to combine these things so that they can be harmful in a greater way, right? So together they can be very, very, very harmful. So we have to think about what are the things that are going to limit the harm and what are the things that are going to balance the advantages of it. So I sort of think of it in terms of a four-pronged base, right? So particularly when you have this ability to prove that you are who you say you are and that you are a human to the people you have to interact with on the internet, then that in and of itself is a huge advantage. I mean, when you think about a lot of the harm that's done, for example, by AI, it comes from this idea of a bot sort of fooling you into thinking that it's human or fooling you into thinking that you should interact with something when in reality, it would not be good to do that, right? Because these bots are created by bad actors typically, or they're created to, increase the user base of some application. So it throws the numbers off and stuff like that, right? So you want to be able to interact with other humans. Now, part of the problem with that is that anonymity has been a huge sort of aspect of the internet, right? So in many cases, there are very good reasons for maintaining anonymity. And I mean, if you want to, if you want to say something, for example, and you don't want people to know where you live or even who you are or whatever it is, you want to be able to preserve your anonymity in such a way that you and your family can maintain safety, right? Um, that is probably the first line of defense. Let's make a personhood credential, right? To prove that you are a human and that you're interacting, that you can trust that you're interacting with a human while online, right? So one of the things additionally that makes a personhood credential so, you know, that we can give it value is we can add another layer on that, which is called a self-sovereign decentralized digital ID. What this ultimately means is that you have your personhood credential is held in a wallet, an identity wallet that you own the keys to, right? It is something that you control who can access it, who you can give access to, what's in it. If some application asks you to exchange your public key from your identity wallet, it will actually ask you, and you'll have to say, okay, I want to sign that. I want to agree that that's an appropriate thing, right? So the combination of a personhood credential and a self-sovereign, decentralized digital ID are a very powerful thing, right? Um, and then again, the assertion that AI is going to be the front end and blockchain is going to be the back end for a lot of interactions we do. The idea of being able to have AI go out and do stuff for us, right? Go out like, I'm thinking, oh, hey, let's just have AI, go and buy us some dog food from, some dog food company and have it delivered us to us every 2 weeks automatically, right? Now, I mean, the company that probably there's probably ways to do that already, but and in such a case, you'd probably use something like a credit card or something like that. But the problem is that um, that's sort of limited to the company itself. And what is probably going to happen is that you'll get on AI and you'll say, "Hey, I'd like you to take some crypto from my blockchain, my crypto wallet, and I'd like you to go and invest it over here. And then once the price reaches some number, then I want you to go ahead and buy some stuff over here." And you can have a whole system of things that AI can do for you. But it relies on the blockchain as a backend. But in and of itself, that doesn't quite I would not say that that's safe, right? So when you include a decentralized self-sovereign digital ID and a personhood credential with the blockchain backend and an AI interface, I think that's a very powerful thing that's pretty safe, where you can prove that you are a human and also prove, in my case, that you have been given permission to actually interact with these things, right? So Grokism creates a clear separation between authorization, which is what you can do, and authentication, which is who you are, right? So if you think about how, for example, a company might onboard an individual to their company. The individual of the company would have to, provide some documents, sign out W-2s and stuff like that to prove that you are who you say you are. I mean, it could be everything from your driver's license to, it could be a passport. It could be anything that's necessary to prove that you are who you say you are, right? Because people have fake identifications and stuff like that. So the company has to be pretty sure of who they are, right? So that's authorization. And then or that I should say that's probably setting up authorization, setting up authentication, right? So that is one of the first parts. The once you go through all that process and you are given some permissions on the network, you're given access to resources and stuff like that, and that's called authorization, right? So you basically log into the network, and then you have been set up with authorization to access resources and so on and so forth, right? So typically the problem with thinking about it exclusively in that way is that those authorization and authentications typically end at the firewall. They end at where your company ends, right? In this particular case, Grokism has to deal with authentication and authorization that is distributed all over the world. You scale out, and you oftentimes scale out way beyond any single company, right? So you could have hundreds or thousands of companies where in Grokism's case, they're providing authentication and authorization service for potentially thousands of companies, right? So and the way we start thinking about this is to assign authorization first, right? So I'll explain a little bit what I mean by that. And then once you authorize or register someone, you assign them permission sets, which are things that basically say you have permissions to do this thing on the D app. And then uh, it goes through this process where it creates a decentralized self-sovereign digital ID for you. And then, this is where you put your personhood credentials, all while maintaining privacy. The preservation of your privacy is maintained, right? So from the perspective of Grokism, if you're a company that wants to build a DApp or wants to build an application and you want people to interact with your application, the application could be anything. It could be, it could be a game. It could be a website, a website where you post blogs. It could be a website where you sell things, an e-commerce website. It could be anything, right? So the point is that you have to think about when your users log on, what do you want them to do? So on one side, this is what we're doing is we're setting up authorization, right? And the authorization is assigned in Grokism, something that I'm calling perm sets. Essentially, these are just permissions. They're basically, in this particular case, this, if you, for example, if you want to assign someone the ability to be an admin on your application, they will be assigned a perm set of, 64355216, right? And these are not hard numbers. This is fake numbers. They're not real, right? You can say, hey, I have a library of Google Docs, and I want this particular user to be able to access these Google Docs. Or if you make a blog, you want people to be able to post to your blog or to be able to take stuff down or whatever it is, right? So in every case, you're assigning a permission that will allow them to do this. So you think of what you want your users to be able to do when the DApp is built, right? So this I'm calling authorization. So in other words, we're setting up authorization before we actually deal with authentication. So authorization comes in with these perm sets, right? So then once you've actually authorized somebody, in this particular case, if company A creates what I'm calling a bookend. And a bookend is just a way, so bookends are a system and process under which a company or organization can be comfortable issuing a verified credential to an individual. So in other words, what you're doing is you're registering a user in such a way that you are comfortable with knowing that they are a human, that they have these particular, that they've been given these permission sets, right? And that they on the DApp side have this ability to, you know, interact with your application in the way that you think they should be, right? Um, so company A creates a bookend for user Alexis and gives her a perm set of PS64356932 and creates a bookend for user Liz, giving her the same perm set. So the idea here is that these are not real perm sets. There's this isn't, real data. And then, another organization, for example, it creates a bookend for user Robert and assigns a perm set of, PS26173293. So what happens then is that these bookends are translated into a verified credential using this service called Hyperledger Identis, right? And although the bookend itself, which is created by the company, will have the information necessary to prove that you are a human. When the verified credential is pushed down to the Hyperledger Identis sort of service, right? The only thing that comes down is the perm sets. In other words, the authorization that has been defined, by you, the company, right? So there's no information, there's no personal information, there's nothing in here that would say anything really about who you are, but you know that because of the assignment of these permission sets, that the company is comfortable with the information that you gave them and that you are human and that you do have these permissions to be able to interact with the app, right? So there can be thousands and thousands of these bookends, thousands and thousands of credentials. So in other words, what happens is these credentials, this is called a verified credential ultimately, and then they're processed and handled by this service called Hyperledger Identis, which is a decentralized, self-sovereign, digitalized D sort of thing where, and really what I should do is I should give a video on exactly how that sort of works as we go, at some other time. So, but Hyperledger Identis is really a part and parcel of my Grokism app, right? Ultimately, what happens is that the Hyperledger Identis sort of scenario takes and writes these credentials down to a verifiable data registry on the Cardano blockchain, right? And then what happens is the verifiable credential is stored in identity wallet in user's private space. So when I say private space, I mean, for example, that it could be stored on your phone. And there's going to be, if you were to look at it, you'd see a DID, you'd see some numbers, you'd see those perm sets. Basically, you'd see it in the form of a schema, of a JSON schema. And that's what this form is. It may look kind of odd, but this is a JSON schema, right? So it's really very simple. Again, only the perm sets, no personal identity information. So you have in your identity wallet, in your private space, you have a list of all the perm sets that you've been assigned from all the apps that you've signed up for. And that means that you have the permissions to interact with all of these apps. And one of the things that happens here through this process is that you have in your identity wallet, you have a decentralized self-sovereign digital ID, and you then log into the Grokism app, right? And then when login takes place, all that gets passed to the DApp is what's called a JSON web token and the list of permission sets assigned to each other, right? So I'm calling this context. So the context is passed to the application when you log in to the application, right? So all of this personal information gets stripped. There's nothing about the company per se, but the company knows that that permission set is something that they made, something that they think about. So these permission sets are unique to each company. They're unique in such a way so that they won't be duplicated across other organizations. So there's not going to be any sort of snafu with mixed up permission sets, right? So again, you log into the D app, the decentralized app, and what gets passed is a long list of numbers called a JSON Web Token, and um, that is a common sort of methodology that is used for logging into applications, internet applications, right? And then the list of permission sets that are assigned to each user. And then further, there's this thing that is called Midnight. So one of the things that with Midnight, so the complete Grokism ecosystem relies on creating decentralized applications with the Midnight.network platform. One of the things that Midnight.network platform is able to do is that those permission sets that are in your private space, Midnight is able to execute smart contracts and using zero knowledge proofs to prove or to as a methodology to prove that you are who you say you are. So in other words, that you have those permissions, right? So I'll just spend a moment talking about smart contracts and zero knowledge proofs. Smart contracts are simply rules. They're rules and they're built upon um, they're built upon a blockchain, a public blockchain, so that the public blockchain can execute things based on a set of rules that is defined in code. So, in other words, you might call it algorithmic law or something like that, right? So, smart contracts are now being used in so many ways, but they're particularly used with financial applications because that seems to me the most obvious sort of thing. And Midnight gives us this ability to use smart contracts on identity information, which, as far as I know, there's probably no one else able to do that. So this ability to interact with our identity sort of stuff in a way that preserves our anonymity and it preserves our privacy. It's kind of new. This is a new thing, right? So, and then the other thing it executes on is this thing called a zero knowledge proof. And a zero knowledge proof is something, that gives you this ability to prove that you have the rights to do something without enabling the verifier of that information to see everything else that's part of in this particular case, part of your identity wallet, part of the stuff that's in your private space. All it has to show is those permission sets and only the permission sets that are required for that particular process, right? So you think about probably the classic case is you go into a bar and the bartender or the waitress asks, hey, you got to prove you're 21. So you bring out your driver's license and you hand over the driver's license. Well, I mean, there's lots of information on that thing, on your driver's license. And all they really need to know that you're over 21 or 21 or older, right? So a zero knowledge proof would simply assert that you have proof that you are 21 years old. They don't need to see anything else, right? So a zero knowledge proof is just a mathematical construct. In this particular case, it doesn't seem very mathematical, but there's a lot of thought that actually goes into, a lot of math that goes into actually coming up with a zero knowledge proof and how it works, right? So um, zero knowledge proofs are mathematical methods, maintains a complete privacy of sensitive information, verifies personhood without exposing identity data, and it's a critical component of Grokism's privacy framework, right? Smart contracts are the rules, automates complex transactions without intermediaries. And then the one of the big things about this is that the idea is that these things all have to work together. I'm calling it, mutual regulation. Mutual regulation in such a way that, for example, AI is regulated because it needs to use your identity and it needs to be able to, uh, call smart contracts on your behalf with your identity, and it needs to be able to use the zero knowledge proofs, and your decentralized self-sovereign digital ID to maintain the anonymity, and yet know for sure 100% that you are who you say you are and that you're human and so on and so forth, right? So these things all have to work together. Mutual regulation. So I go back to the four-pronged approach, um, decentralized identity, AI integration, because the value of AI is gonna come from the stuff that it can do for us. It's going to come from having it do something, right? Having it go out and buy some stuff for us, having it go out, have a long-term maintenance of some process. And it's going to need to be able to have to use your identity and use the process to actually do these things on your behalf, because you wouldn't just want to say, hey, I give you a credit card number, you go out and go ahead and do this, right? So, and then the other part is blockchain security provides a mutable record keeping for credential verification. That's called the verifiable data registry. And the Midnight chain itself, that is in of itself a blockchain. It's called a security and identity blockchain. And really, if you are interested in that, um, there's some great tutorials on midnight.network for you to learn how to actually do things like write smart contracts and so on and so forth, right? So mutual regulation is a system of checks and balances, and it checks and balances each other for systemic integrity. I think mutual regulation is an important thing in this particular case because particularly with AI, I don't think they're going to be able to have legislative solutions. I don't think there's any legislative solution that any of our governments are going to be able to put out there. The cat's already out of the bag. I mean, these AIs are coming from all over the world. They're coming from many different directions. No one knows how they're trained. No one knows what they're trained. So there's like plausible deniability with with IP. There's all kinds of different things that mutual regulation sort of solves, right? There's just no way that legislation is going to fix any of it. And blockchain is sort of the same way. Blockchain is open protocol. Everyone knows what you're doing. All they have to look at is a block scanner and they can tell what you bought. They can tell where you bought it from, basically. That's sort of the thing that's preventing companies, I think, from really embracing blockchain as a solution for day-to-day activities. Whether it's their IoT services, or whether it's their whole systems of buying stuff. I mean, you don't want anyone to be able to see who you're buying from, what you're buying, how much you're paying for something, right? That's just not a reasonable thing for a company to engage in because they need to be able to keep a secret. So the combination of all of these things, decentralized self-sovereign digital ID, um, a combination of the Grokism the Grokism environment, basically, the Grokism system, Midnight Network, all of these things will allow us to have a regulative approach that is algorithmic, automatic, and not changeable. So in other words, it's a system that it's there all the time, right? So, um, in my opinion, Grokism is an incredible thing. Of course, I built it and I'm biased, but I think it provides a service that has never ultimately existed before. It comes down to being able to know who you are. It comes down to be able to have security, maintain anonymity, be able to use all of the modern sort of technology, AI, blockchain, all of these things that are thrusting us into the future. So I hope this is a an informative sort of thing. Again, uh, drop me a line at robert@grokism.com and we can talk about whatever you want. Anyway, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Bye bye.